Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight, Black Voices. I'm Brandis Friedman, and thanks for sharing part of your weekend with us. On the show tonight, a product that millions of black women use to straighten their hair over the years has now been linked to uterine cancer. We'll talk about hair relaxers, the risks of these products, and how so much of our identity is tangled up in our hair. Art intersects with public space in the work of a new MacArthur Fellow from Chicago. We welcome artist and architect Amanda Williams.
It's a lot of untapped talent in communities just like this, but you don't know about it until you actually go there.
And we take you inside a new call center helping transform the Chatham neighborhood. All that is coming up, but our first story tonight, what new research and a lawsuit say about hair relaxers and cancer. That's right after this.
Chicago Tonight, Black Voices is made possible in part by Fifth Third Bank and by the support of these donors.
At Fifth Third, we believe when diverse voices are heard and empowered, communities are made stronger, lives are made better, and the future holds greater promise for all. That's why we're proud to support Chicago Tonight Black Voices. Together, we can make a difference. Together, we can drive change.
Over the years, millions of black women have become familiar with using a product that just recently has been linked to possible uterine cancer. The study from the National Institute of Health shows women who use chemical hair relaxers or straighteners may have a higher risk of the disease. And now, a Missouri woman is suing 5 beauty companies, including L'Oreal, claiming the relaxers caused her uterine cancer at the age of 28. That diagnosis eventually led to a hysterectomy. Joining us to talk about the study and the social pressure to straighten black hair are Patrice Yurcik, a writer and beauty influencer and creator of the beauty blog Afrobella. Dr. June McCoy, professor of medicine, medical education, and preventive medicine at Northwestern University. Dr. McCoy also holds a law degree. And Dr. Nita Karnik-Lee, an associate professor of obstetrics and gynecology at UChicago Medicine. Thanks to all three of you for joining us. Patrice Yurcik, let's start with you. Please explain for us briefly how these relaxers work and how commonly they are used by black women and girls.
Okay, relaxers are commonly used. It's a chemical mixture that is applied to the scalp, applied to the roots of the hair, and left on for a duration of time. And that alters the appearance of the hair. It loosens the curl, and it makes the hair lie flat, and it changes the texture.
How frequently would you say these are used?
I started using them when I was 6 years old. I stopped when I was age 23. I did it approximately, I would say, every month or to 6 weeks to maintain, because you don't want your roots to start growing out. So it's a pretty regularly done practice if you are in the habit of using a relaxer.
Yeah, a familiar experience for a lot of black women, certainly not all, but many. Dr. Lee, explain for us the link between uterine cancer and hair relaxers that the National Institutes of Health found.
Yeah, so this study just came out recently where they had taken a very large cohort of women. There were over 33,000 women who are taking part of a bigger study that's looking on ongoing risk factors for breast cancer and other conditions. And they separated this out and looked specifically about the women who had developed uterine cancer over time, and they saw a difference between the women who had never used a hair straightening product versus those who had had more frequent use of a straightening product. Their risk of uterine cancer seemed to have changed from about 1.6 to almost 4%. So the risk grew quite a bit, though the cancer as a whole is not as common as breast cancer. But because uterine cancer is increasing in our country, this is a really important link to be thinking about.
So in a statement, the Personal Care Products Council says, quote, the study does not account for a number of other differences that may be associated with increased incidence as the uterine cancer cases tended to be older with an earlier age at the first menstrual period, a higher BMI and lower physical activity, and notes a stronger association of straightener use among women with low physical activity. These other observed associations were largely ignored in the study. The statement also points out that association isn't necessarily causation. Dr. McCoy, what are your thoughts on the NIH study and whether the woman bringing the lawsuit has a case?
I believe the woman bringing the lawsuit has a case, and that this case will ultimately end up being a class action lawsuit. And I say that because it mirrors some of the things we've seen with the talcum powder cases, where young girls or even as babies started using talcum powder. There is no cause and effect. I want to stress that, but you don't need a cause and effect to actually bring a lawsuit forward. You need to show that the manufacturer, the producer of the product, included products that they knew or should have known were potentially carcinogenic. And then you have to show that the association is strong enough. In this case, the woman bringing the lawsuit forward was age 28 when she had to have a total hysterectomy because of endometrial cancer. And this woman started using the hair product for a long time. So you don't have the cause and effect, but the association is great. And you have proof that products within, ingredients within a certain product that a manufacturer is using is potentially carcinogenic. So I think these people have a lawsuit going forward.
Patrice, Black women, many women of color feel a social pressure to meet a certain beauty standard. What is that like, and how do the hair relaxers factor into that?
Yeah, I was definitely raised in a family that encouraged that kind of a Eurocentric, I guess, beauty standard. And, you know, I mean, going back as far as my own mother, she was told if her hair was not done, she should stay in the back and not be part of whatever was going on that evening. That belief is then passed down into the whole family. And it's something that's part of our larger society as well. And it's something that we have to kind of examine and question. Why do we believe these things? Why do we carry this forward? Also, the use of the word like professionalism in terms of how we wear our hair, how we present ourselves is something that we have to examine, because the way I present myself, the way my hair looks has nothing to do with my performance on the job.
Dr. Lee, this recent research was about uterine cancer, but is it possible that there is more research to come about a wide range of female health issues, infertility included?
You know, it's very hard to tell because I think this just kind of opens the window to it. I mean, I think it's very important because it raises this question within a group of women. You know, Black women in general also have a higher risk of dying from uterine cancer. So our investigation into like what could be a hypothesis around this and around other cancers or around other health conditions may be very important. Obviously, this study doesn't show causation, but it does really start to open our eyes towards, you know, like us as consumers. It starts to open our eyes as scientists in terms of what we're thinking about. And so I think it really widens the range of what we need to be thinking about when we're thinking about cancer risk reduction.
Dr. McCoy, is it possible that the companies were aware of the potential carcinogenic properties in their products?
Interestingly enough, another study done by the NIH actually showed a problem with breast cancer incidence and cases because of hair straighteners. So there's been there was a study done before in women showing that these drugs that actually, or ingredients that actually increase or cause hormonal changes actually can have a high association with female cancers. So yes, I believe they were aware. Number one of the ingredients is formaldehyde, another parabens, and then some others. We have long known that with heat, when the hair is heated up, and as Patrice mentioned, how the straightening process goes, when it's heated up, formaldehyde becomes actually toxic. And formaldehyde is a known carcinogen. So they knew that. And something I want to point out, these products are regulated by 4 agencies: the Federal Trade Commission, the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, and the EPA. But in terms of the FDA, the products that are sold, the hair straightener products that are sold, the ones that are used in these beauty salons, are actually marketed to professional companies, and they do not have to list the ingredients on the label. So the truth is the transparency is lost when products are sold that way. And we don't know what percentage or what of ingredient is present in those products. So I do believe that the company knew. Sorry,
okay.
Please go on.
No, it's okay. It's good information. You know, we've got a couple of seconds left, Dr. McCoy. Advice to women who are still using relaxers or have used them.
My advice to women is to stop, take a pause, wait and see what happens. the risk to you is too great. The statute of limitations, for instance, in Illinois for personal injury cases is 2 years, but it doesn't start tolling until you're aware of it in many regards. I would say stop, do what I'm sure our Dr. Lee would recommend, exercise, watch your weight, keep your weight down to decrease your uterine cancer risk, and take a pause on the button of using hair straighteners going forward.
And we've got just a couple seconds left. Patrice, I don't know if you can answer this in the very brief amount of time that we've got. A lot of Black women's identity is tied up in our hair, would you say?
Yes, absolutely. And I think it's time for us to question, is it worth using something that could be potentially caustic to our health to maintain this appearance when there are alternative ways to style our hair? If you still want that straight look, you can achieve it without using a harsh chemical that can affect you in terms of getting a cancer.
Okay, that's where we'll have to leave it. My thanks to Patrice Yersick, Dr. June McCoy, and Dr. Nita Karnik-Lee for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Back in 2018, Target prompted an outcry when it announced plans to shutter 2 of its Southside Chicago locations. One of them, the Chatham location, anchored a retail hub in the heart of the community for a decade and employed over 150 people. The 100,000 square foot building got a new lease on life last year when Riverwoods-based Discover Financial Services began transforming it into a call center that would employ 1,000 people, mostly from the surrounding area, by 2024. Today, with about 500 employees in place, Discover leadership says their community-focused approach is paying off. Producer Erica Gunderson has that story.
And I do thank you for your patience. I certainly do appreciate it.
By the time we're fully ramped up, there'll be about 10 million calls a year that's funneled through this customer care center.
In the 11 years Watisse Gathings has worked for Discover Financial Services, she's managed call centers across the country.
For me, well before being a Discover employee, I was a girl from the South Side first.
Gathings' role as Regional Operations Director of the Discover Customer Care Center in Chatham is something of a homecoming for the former Southsider. But it's also something of a departure, since the dense urban Chatham has little in common with Discover's other call centers, all of which are in suburban office parks where the workforces are majority white.
There is this ecosystem of family and connectedness unlike we have at any other location. We're proud that almost 90% of our employees live within 5 miles of the center. We've been operating for a little over a year. We have well over 150 employees that have been promoted, and some of them have been promoted multiple times since starting here.
CEO Roger Hochschild says when Discover began making plans in 2019 to open their first new call center in over 20 years, the company took a fresh look at their approach.
Call centers are critically important for us at Discover. We're the only major bank with 100% US-based customer service. We picked Chatham because we wanted to do what we could to bring opportunity to communities that had been underinvested. And I strongly believe that's something that large companies can do, and only large companies can do, which is bring jobs at scale into the community. Close to 90% of our employees here in the center are Black, and so as part of our focus around diversity and equity and inclusion and changing the racial makeup of Discover, this center is critically important to that. The attrition rate is less than half of what we see in our other centers. There's a faster speed to proficiency. This is our best performing call center, and I couldn't be more excited about that.
Greater Chatham Initiative Executive Director Nidra Sims-Fears says Discover's success story thus far shows it makes good business sense to bank on Chatham.
We have good housing stock that's affordable. We have good schools. We have good transportation. We have able and willing workforce, and we have good retail. What else do you want?
Employees at the Chatham Center say working close to home in jobs with growth opportunity is paying dividends for them.
I was really, really fortunate that this was available for me. So it's been kind of like a dream come true because I can be a mom, a really, really great mom, and I can come to work and be in corporate America, essentially.
Before, I wasn't able to basically be in the family's life at all, really. I wasn't responsible for dropping my daughter off at daycare or picking her up because I wasn't able to. Now I'm able to. With the hours that I have now, I can pick her up.
Everything I needed to know about working in the call center, they trained me to do it. Everything I need to know now about doing my job as a technical apprentice, they're training me to do it.
In addition to drawing from the community for its workforce, Discover scaled their service needs to allow them to contract with small local businesses.
We just want the opportunity. We don't want any handouts. We don't want anyone to give us anything pro bono. We just want you to point us in the right direction, and we'll pull up our sleeves and we'll show you that we're capable of doing work on this magnitude and even bigger.
The Chatham Center also features a community center, which local nonprofits can use at no cost for meetings and events. The rotating selection of art filling the space comes from I Paint My Mind, which curates arts from local artists for businesses.
They're getting this incredible art in their space, so they get value and that incredible service from us, but also knowing that that helps I Paint My Mind deliver much needed and often underfunded arts programs to local schools is way more than a cherry on top for us.
Discover Leadership says this model of community investment as a business decision has created a whole new blueprint for future endeavors.
It's really transformed us as a company. I like to say we actually get more out of this than the people of Chatham.
That's what allows us to translate that into good business for us to make sure that they thrive, and through that they take really good care of our customers in return.
The business results speak for themselves. Again, as I said, this is our top performing call center, and so we are committed to Chatham for the long term.
And 1 year in, the employees we spoke with say they're all in on Discover too.
Often bigger companies are scared to come into communities like this, right? They're scared that they won't get the right talent or just they won't be successful. And I think Discover said, well, we're going to take that chance.
It's a lot of untapped talent in communities just like this, but you don't know about it until you actually go there, and that's what Discover actually did.
I can't wait to see, like, a year from now, how it's changed the community and the people within it.
For Chicago Tonight, Black Voices, this is Erica Gunderson.
And if you're wondering about the fate of the other shuttered Target in Morgan Park, it became a Blue Cross Blue Shield of Illinois wellness center that opened in 2020. Up next, a MacArthur Genius Grant recipient from Chicago in a conversation recorded earlier. The MacArthur Foundation recently announced its annual list of fellows, honoring creative individuals with a no-strings-attached grant. It's often called the Genius Grant. 3 Chicagoans made the list, including sociologist Reuben Jonathan Miller and composer Tamika Reed. They're both out of town, and we'll catch up with them later. But for now, we're pleased to welcome artist, architect, and now MacArthur Fellow, Amanda Williams. Welcome to Chicago Tonight, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So, congrats, obviously. When and how did you receive the news?
So I got the news a little over a month ago. I actually was at my alma mater, Cornell University. I'd just given a lecture. I was dragging my youngest daughter around campus, reminiscing, and I was literally standing at my dormitory explaining to her that when I walked through those doors, my life changed. And then the phone rang. And it was the foundation calling. I said, do you have somewhere you can take a moment to yourself? You know, so when you get that kind of call, you're panicked, you know. And so when she said, we're calling from the MacArthur Foundation, you know, it's, no, you're not. You know, the cry, the tears start. And then it was just a blur, like whatever they were saying, you're just not listening anymore.
Of course, like you're going to have to repeat all of this again
Yes.
to me later on when I can actually pay attention. And of course, you don't know the phone call is coming because no one does.
No.
How would you describe your work, your art?
I think my work uses color as its kind of framework to both draw viewers or participants in, but also to talk about very difficult subjects in a very accessible way. So, of course, in Chicago, race and color are intertwined. So there's a way in which I'm able to use color to get people to understand something as complex as redlining, because red is an understandable color, or ultra sheen, or pink oil moisturizer. So I've developed this kind of process of using color to describe complex kind of spatial situations. My training's in architecture, so it really helps bridge this gap between what people might think of as art in a two-dimensional sense. I make paintings and drawings and so forth, but then the built environment as a canvas as well.
And we're looking at some images of your art right now because we were doing a story last week at the Smart Museum of Art at University of Chicago. We shot some video of a project of yours that got a lot of attention. This is Colored Theory. Tell us about that. And you just named some of those colors
Yes,
that you
so,
created.
so color theory is a kind of Western convention. It's something you learn in art school and architecture school. And I was joking with a friend that I was an expert in colored theory. And so what might that mean and look like? And so I really thought about colors that impacted my life when I was coming of age on the South Side. And what would that palette be for people that were like me? And so I developed this palette of 8, and then I decided I was going to test it out on the largest canvas possible, which would be these abandoned houses. And then it really did become a project that helped highlight some of the injustices that created that environment. But really the colors were the inspiration for me as an artist, as a painter, as an architect. So there was this kind of perfect, storm of ways to bring together all of those interests and skill sets.
And of course, the colors are named for some very memorable colors in the Black community. The Ultra Sheen, the blue, Ultra Sheen blue moisturizer, and of course
Harold's Chicken Shack.
Harold's Chicken Shack, of course, everybody, a Chicago favorite.
So it was important to have colors that would be both sort of like mnemonic devices and bring people joy or happiness, but also point to an idea of value. So how could these houses get to this condition? And what does it mean to shroud them in things that we actually think are priceless? And so color can do that in a way that messaging can't, that rallying can't, but it can lead to those types of changes. So it was really important to me to frame it actually very much about my own experience and not try to be universal or explain everyone's experience. The West Side would have a completely different palette even.
Of course. Do you feel your work is mostly about Chicago, or could some of these explorations pertain to any big city?
I think on purpose that work was very much about Chicago. It was very much about me having an internal dialogue about wanting to become an architect to change this landscape and then feeling frustrated about that. So I wanted to do things that were hyper-specific. But I think I've been able to now bridge the idea of color beyond that. I have another project called What Black Is This You Say that came during the pandemic, and it really questioned or challenged whose Black lives were mattering. There was this panic to make everything okay. So there's a mainstream sort of acceptance of Black Lives Matter, which had, been maligned maybe a year or two before. And so it's like, well, which Black lives? The ones that back into parking spaces at Mariano's, or the ones that know which fork you eat shrimp with? Black people are very diverse in and of themselves. And so what does it mean to try to make a monolithic sort of blanket acceptance?
And we also have some video of a collaboration that you did with artist Shawnee Crow at a gallery a couple of years ago. Tell us what this fellowship means for you and your artistic practice.
I think it just says keep going. I think it says continue to take risk and to dream big. Shawnee and I did that project with Andres L. Hernandez, who also was an architecture and Cornell grad. And that was for the Venice Biennale. Originally, it came back to Chicago and really wanted to think about these spaces of joy and spaces of protection for Black women. And so I think thinking always beyond, thinking a little bit further than one might assume either art can inspire or a topic that might not seem like it would be universal but actually should be or is. This weekend I'm planting 100,000 tulips in vacant lots on the South Side at 53rd and Prairie. And so it's just right on time. It's an exciting kind of extension for somebody that might have just won a Genius Grant to say, what does it look like to recreate the footprint of the houses that would have existed there had it not been for redlining? So we're planting these red tulips to redefine redlining. Most of the work is collaborative, participatory. It's a way that people can see that art can be a catalyst for change.
You trained as an architect and have made the transition obviously to art full time. How does your background in architecture inform your art?
I think I got into architecture because I thought that was a vehicle for transforming space or bringing autonomy to space. A lot of what I saw was inequity. At 7 years old, I didn't have the language for that. But I knew when I'd crossed the Dan Ryan, it was very different. When I crossed Madison, it was very different. And so I think the idea that you can literally change space or be a space shaper is the ultimate definition of architecture. And art allows that in a way that's extremely versatile. Buildings out of necessity need to stand up. They need to operate a certain sort of way. So I appreciate and respect my training and my peers that are architects, capital A. But I also understand that to really create the spaces that we aspire to, you have to have participation and community buy-in. And oftentimes that comes from behavior and spatial practices and not from the building itself.
All right. right, that's where we'll have to leave it. Amanda Williams, congrats again. Thank you so much for joining us. I know the last day or so has been a bit of a blur.
Yes.
Good luck to you.
All right, thank you so much for having me.
And we're back to wrap things up right after this. And that's our show for this weekend. If you're watching us on Saturday night, know that you can also catch Black Voices and Latino Voices on Sundays beginning at 10 p.m. And join me and Paris Schutz next week at 7 on Chicago Tonight. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight Black Voices, I'm Brandis Friedman. Thanks for sharing part of your weekend with us. Stay healthy and safe, and have a good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a personal injury law firm pleased to give back to the community through numerous charitable initiatives.